Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am John Mann, Director of Education for Lakeside, and for today we're fortunate that Jim Schweitzer has joined us to give a talk on changes to the zoning regulations in Lakeside and HPDRB process for cottage exterior changes. Jim is a full-time resident of Lakeside with his wife, Lori. He is currently the Lakeside Development Administrator overseeing HPDRB and Lakeside land usage on a part-time basis. He served on the Lakeside Association Board before taking on this current position. And Jim is retired from a 38-year career in the telecommunications industry in 2018, the majority of which was with AT&T. Now, this session is supported by the Lucille and Verl Smith Endowment for Historic Preservation. Lucille and Verl operated Smith Realty back in the 70s and the 80s and were very active in the Lakeside community. Lucille served on the association board for several terms, and both were active in Lakeside Methodist Church along with many other Lakeside groups. I do ask if you would please mute your cell phone ringers and help me in welcoming Jim Schweitzer.
All right, thank you. So I'm looking around the crowd and they always say, know your audience, and I know most of you. And I know most of you not just because of being neighbors, but you've been through this process with me. So are you building more? Great. What I would like to know is if anybody's like a first-time or new cottage owner or are really about to do a project, let me know. Fantastic. Anybody else? Very good. I like that. So I want to make sure that those of you that have been through this process, as you learn more and more about what you've experienced or if there are changes, share them with your neighbors, because I think that the hardest thing we have here is letting people know, especially if you've got a neighbor that just bought the cottage, is to let them know that we actually do have a Historic Preservation Design Review Board chaired by Dale Noble. And I'll bring him up here in an advertisement here in a minute, but also that we do try to keep the character of Lakeside as best as possible in maintaining our historic district. And we do have specific rules and regs around what we can and can't do with the properties that we own. And I'm going to give you, before I even get going, the number one thing I hear all the time from people that don't believe they need to come to us is, I bought the property, I can do whatever I want with it. And so it's a battle that's been fought for many, many years, and it gets better every year as more and more people say, oh, go talk to Schweitzer or go talk to Lisa Hogue at the front desk and see what you have to do. And I'm proud to say that very few people are doing things rogue and begging forgiveness anymore, so that's a plus. This is my shameless advertisement for Dale, who's going to be giving a talk on the 7th at 3:30 in this room. Dale is going to talk about historic preservation at Lakeside and the history and the philosophy behind it, so you'll understand better why we do this process. Today I'm just basically going over the process. Now, the newspaper article said I was going to specifically talk about changes to zoning, and I will address some of the zoning changes we made. Those changes were made in 2023. Last year I gave a presentation. The newspaper printed exactly the same article we did last year. The good news is my picture was 6 years old. The article was only 1 year old. But I'm going to talk more about the process, but I will get into some of the zoning changes because they're significant and why we did them. So just to give a shout out to Danbury Zoning, we work very closely with Kathy Dale, who's the Danbury Zoning Administrator. And Kathy does her best to make sure that when a project is coming from Lakeside, that you get a lot of attention from her. Has anybody worked with Kathy? It's always been a positive experience, correct? She is amazing. Well, we're trying to mimic that here so that when you come to me, it's always a good experience. We're trying to make this easier for you so that when you go to the HPDR board, all the questions that are typically asked are already answered and available. So zoning was adopted in November of 1975. That means about 70% of the cottages that are here today were built before zoning existed. That doesn't matter to zoning. When you make a change, their rules are now in effect. So we do have to follow them despite the fact that a cottage might have been built beforehand. The township's divided into many zones or districts. We have 3. Up until a year ago, we only had 2. We have the L district, which encompasses the majority of the private residents. We have the LBO, or the Lakeside Business Overlay, and the one we just added in April of '23 is the LMO, or the Lakeside Municipal Overlay. And these various levels of zoning allow Lakeside to do a number of things. Now, why would we make changes to zoning? I'm going to give you a couple minute primer on it, and then we're going to move on to process. For many years, zoning managed all the common things we're used to: 55% lot coverage on a typical lot up to 3,320 square feet, 45% lot coverage on larger lots. We have rules for impervious surface ratio, which I'll get into, is 75%, but then they have the setbacks, and the setbacks were the big thing: 3-foot side, 3-foot rear, 5-foot front. 40% of the cottages were built well into the setbacks over the years, well before there was zoning, which makes these cottages non-conforming, which is a struggle when we get into zoning issues. The biggest change to the zoning text amendments I made in 2023 was we had Danbury zoning setback set to 0, front and sides. Now, wherever a business abuts to a residential, or an LBO to an L in this case, there's still a 3-foot setback required in zoning. But for the most part, all the zoning setbacks were set to 0, and people were thinking, why would you do that? We want zoning to be the bad guys. Well, the Lakeside rules still say setbacks will be 3 foot in the rear side and 5 foot in the front. So Lakeside is still responsible for it. If you want to build into the setback, you still need to go to the Municipal Services Committee, apply to them for a variance, just like you're going to a Board of Zoning Appeal for a variance. And for very good reason, we took this over, and it was because we took 3/4 of the non-conforming cottages in Lakeside and instantly made them conforming, so that when you want to do a project, you can now build. If you were non-conforming, you could only add up to 20%, as an example, of new square footage. Well, we just had a cottage go through Board of Zoning Appeal on a 16-foot wide lot. They're adding 34 square feet to the footprint of their cottage, and it puts them well past the 55% lot coverage, required a zoning variance. In Lakeside, our lots are relatively small. So to do something minor impacts the zoning in a major way. So by going to 0-foot setbacks, we reduced our trips to the Board of Zoning Appeal from 15 on average per year to 2. Now, what does that really mean? Doesn't mean a whole lot to the Board of Zoning Appeals. They get paid for every case they hear. What it means is, as a cottage owner, most of you don't have to go through that process, which is a 60-day process minimum. So we took that off the plate for most people. And I see you shaking your head because I know you went through that process. And some of you in here have gone through that process and thought, well, if I waited a couple years, I would have missed that. But it's much easier for those going forward. I still did 2 appeals in the last 2 months, 3 months. I've been to 2 meetings because of situations where the lots are so small that that extra little bit of square footage you're adding impacted zoning. But anyway, zoning is around because they want to make sure we build in a way that's safe. So thinking of a 3-foot setback on a side yard lot, today, a brand new cottage can't be any closer than 6 feet to its neighbor then, at the eave. Those are setbacks are to the eave, lot coverage is to the footprint of the foundation. There's a significant difference, but the reason is fire protection. You would think a greater setback would be even better, it's true, but we don't have the space on the property here. Anybody know when our lots were all platted first in Lakeside? Take a guess, throw a number out. completely surveyed down to every single lot that exists today as you know it. All right. Close? It was 1880. The leases started in 1875, but the land wasn't fully platted until 1880. And it's pretty much the same today. There's been a lot of changes by cottage owners, but it impacts the size of the lot. Makes it a challenge, of course, to build a cottage that now meets zoning, and I'll get into that in a bit too. The slides somehow got out of order here. Let me scroll down real quick. Here we go. There's the zoning map, but it's hard to read. But the blue lines down below are the new LMO, Lakeside Municipal Overlay. The general blue areas are the L district, and then the other area you see up where we are right now is the business district, or LBO, and each one has different rules. And why would we do that? Well, take a look at the hotel. One of the reasons I had to make a change was to the height. So all cottages can only be built to 30 feet, and at some point, LBO only had a 35-foot height restriction. But if we lose the tower on the hotel, which is 44 feet high, we could only rebuild to 35, which wouldn't fit, so we couldn't replace it. So I moved that to 45 feet in that case. And then in LMO, we actually set it at 70 feet, because we don't know what might ever get built ever, but let's say the backstage of Hoover is replaced and you need a fly bridge, which is sets that go up instead of roll onto a roller or something. So you need twice the height of the building. Well, right now that's 38, 42 feet, somewhere in there, and it needs to go to 70 feet so you can have this fly bridge space. So we added that for that kind of a situation, and that's why we made those changes. Some other things were the Memorial Garden is in Marblehead, and so where the Memorial Garden is specifically is zoned as a cemetery, and then we added the area where the plaques are, and we added a zoning allowance for cemetery there as well, because we didn't know if the plaques should have been part of the cemetery or not. So I just changed rules to, or zoning to make sure we covered our bases there. But that's what the map tells us. It's hard to read. Let me see. And then this slide gives you a rough idea today. If your house was burnt in a fire and you had to replace it, you have to meet zoning. So this shows you 3-foot side yard, 5-foot front. On this side, you see 9 by 18. You're required to have 1 car on-site parking. Many, probably more than 400, don't have, in Lakeside today, any parking on the leasehold. Now, you'll all say, I park in the front all the time. In the right-of-way, and that's fine, but it doesn't count for zoning, which has to be on-site. So you can see now that if you wanted to replace a cottage today, you actually build a smaller one than you could have before. So a 33 typical lot, Danbury requires a minimum of 20-foot frontage, a minimum of 600 square feet on the first floor plan. These are the kind of zoning things that we have to manage to in HPDRB when a new cottage is coming to us, or if somebody is going to do a substantial amount of alteration to their existing one. So you can see with zoning, 55% lot coverage, 1 car on site, and 30-foot max height are the key numbers we look at. Again, setbacks are now under Lakeside's purview. And then Lakeside adds in impervious surface ratio of 75%. That's either your house as if it were sitting on the ground, plus any hardscape, concrete patios, stamp patios, and even permeable pavers are counted as impervious surface, because in a deluge of rain, the water has to go somewhere and it doesn't percolate through those bricks. All right, we also now require porches in the front. Currently, the language just says porches. It's going to be altered to say porches in the front, because we ran into a snag on a new cottage. They put the porch in the back. Well, the intent was for porches to be in the front. So we're going to clarify that in the language. But part of the Lakeside charm is to be able to be on a porch and have people walking by and stop and say hi. However, we prefer screened or open porches. We did not deny the fact that there could be an enclosed porch, because when you look at the space limitations, people are converting it over time, many of their porches into conditioned living space. All right, let me go back up into here. So this, when you go to the Lakeside webpage, you'll find under communities and communities again, as you scroll through the webpage, you can get to Historic Preservation Design Review Board. And this kind of gives you a brief, quick history. Who's the members of the board? And this is going to change because some of them are reaching their limit of time on the board. So we're working on that right now. So if you know anybody that would be a good candidate for HPDRB, talk to Dale Noble. Go to his talk on the 7th and pass those names along. He'd welcome that. The other thing is this gives you a brief history at the top of the page, and it says, homeowners must submit plans to HPDRB for any physical changes to ensure they are in keeping with Lakeside's heritage and character. That's really a singular sentence that says it all. What that boils down to when you bring a plan to us is don't mess with the facade as best as possible, because that's really what we see. We have a litmus test that says if your cottage looks like this and you do work on it and somebody saw it a year before you did the work and come back a year after, they need to recognize it as your cottage. I have some samples later in the presentation that will demonstrate how well that can be done. So the process to modernize our rules began in 2019, and we thought, we'd just do this in a couple of years. And a couple people in the room here were part of that process. Then COVID hit. A lot of things slowed down, starting with the budget, starting with how many people were coming into Lakeside. And then the priority shifted so that people like myself who were doing a day job were cleaning the bathrooms and picking up the trash during other hours of the day because we didn't have people working here. So a lot of this kind of paused for a little bit, but then we kicked it back into high gear in 2022 and wrapped them up in 2023. We rearranged them so that they made sense too. Title I is now just definitions. Title II are the ground rules, and Title III is the HPDRB process. Over time, our rules morphed to the point where to understand something, you were flipping between all three. And it was a confusing process to begin with. We made it more confusing as the rules were added to over time. So we made it more simple with a logical flow. And I'll give a lot of credit to Don Leach on that, who's here to correct me if I'm wrong. I get that, and I appreciate the support. I mentioned the major changes to zoning already. I'm not going to go over this slide, but the setbacks were the biggest. I call it the big darn deal. That was the biggest change that we made, and really going forward from that change, the cottage owners don't know how good they have it because those 10 or 12 people a year that would have gone to the Board of Zoning appeal process didn't really have to worry about it. All right, so this is the important stuff. How do I know I need to apply? And so if you have your LPOA directory, the rules are published in the directory. They're also online on the HPDRB page. You can search for them. The critical page that tells you, yes, I have to apply, will be found in Title III of the appendix. And the appendix has a section that says, what constitutes change? And in there are these bullet points, which are going to take a couple pages to go to. But however static a neighborhood, a street, or a whole community may seem to be, change is forever underway. While it would be difficult to enumerate all of them, blah, 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 it's on this list here. So re-roofing in a new material, a new pattern, or a new color. Now the good news here is this used to be a must to go to HPDRB, but we now have what's called administrative authority. So the person in my position, myself, can now make decisions on roofs, roof colors. I'm still shifting from shingles to metal to the board just to verify that it's the right thing to do for that style of cottage. But for the most part, that's an administrative decision now. Introducing roof skylights or elements that weren't there before, go to HPDRB. Residing in a new material. So if it's wood, and this is a big one, we normally say maintenance is allowed, right? Like for like materials. If you had wood siding, replace with wood siding. Now, 21st century needs of the cottage owner, people aren't willing to paint every 10 years anymore, or the wood is 120, 130, 140 years old, and it's beyond its useful life. Prior to our getting involved so much with HPDRB in the material styles, people were putting vinyl siding on before permissions were needed, basically 1994 and earlier. When you put vinyl on 100-year-old wood, there's no good vapor barrier to protect it. You're actually building a system that will rot the rest of your cottage away. And so what we're doing now is saying, basically we've outlawed vinyl, first of all, but then we go to modern building products like Hardy Plank, which is a cementatious product, a cement board, or composite products, LP Smart Side, or Select Siding, that have a good wood appearance, but will be bug-free, don't get eaten by bugs, that are gonna last for the next 100 years and don't need to be painted constantly, so, or given attention to, and will withstand the coastal environment better. So we're being a little more lenient on that, but if you have a contributing cottage, we're gonna be very strict on requesting that you do everything you can to preserve the wood. Changes to a chimney, its height, style, changes to eaves, their depth, overhang, and to built-in gutters. Why would eave depth be interesting to us? It changes the distance to the setback. It also changes the appearance, especially in the front. Removal of original architectural features such as wood fret. So in modern cottages, we're not so interested in putting what we call tchotchke or engineered elements or design elements on cottages to make it lakeside-ish. But if they were there as an original item, we're hoping you do all you can to preserve that. And then removal of corner boards, windows, casings, door casings, and other wood trim. So if it was there and it was wood, we're trying to preserve that kind of stuff. However, AZEC is becoming a reasonable product for survivability, so that the wood rot on certain, if you're right up on the lakefront especially, gets to be tedious to try to stay up with. All right, changes to windows, especially their shape, size, muntins, mullions. The muntin is the cross pieces in the window. The mullions are the big bars between different windows. And if you change that, that changes the look of the cottage. Now, maybe in the rear of the cottage, we're a little bit more forgiving, but remember that facade is where we're trying to preserve the look. Changes to canopies, cupolas, porches, their shape, similar to the, let me, on my screen, hold on one second, give subtitles a try. I don't want to give them a try. All right, so. Thanks, I had this big bar in the middle, I couldn't see my own screen. Thanks, I had, oh, it's, yeah, there you go. We got to stop that. Did that stop that? Nope. That's funny. Who said that? Okay. You're not a teenager. I don't know. I've never turned this on before. This is kind of funny. Well, I can do this, and then I can do this. Get rid of that, and then go to, where's my slideshow? There we go, right there. Ta-da. All right. And if masonry is affected, it changes to new masonry surfaces and new mortar mixes. Outbuildings, such as garages, sheds, gazebos, and carports. This is kind of interesting to note. Sheds are a very common thing for us to see as applications. When somebody puts in a shed, to us it's a shed, to Danbury it's an accessory building. So as soon as it's an accessory building, they now own the setbacks again. So there has to be 3 foot from the rear, 3 foot from the side, has to be rear or side, can't be street facing. And so we follow Danbury zoning when it comes to the sheds. When it comes to the design of the sheds, we are interested in making sure there's no crossbuck, country-style shed look in Lakeside, because we aren't a farmland look per se. So if you're buying a shed from JDM Structures and it has the crossbucks, we at least ask that they get painted the same color so they don't stand out. But that's our involvement of it. Danbury has a stronger involvement it gets back into the setbacks. So fencing is another issue. So the issue with Danbury with fencing is we've set it to 6 feet to the rear as max height, but the top 2 feet have to be at least 60% opacity or less. In other words, you put in a herringbone or a crosshatch at the top so you can see through it. And then the side yard can't be any higher than 4 feet. If your fence is shorter than 3 feet and decorative in a garden, generally zoning doesn't worry about it, and generally we don't either. But we do appreciate if people apply for that. Then removing major natural growth, primarily trees, even on your property. It used to be that all trees went through HPDRB. We've changed that process so that if you want to do something with a tree on your yard, it goes through Kyle Buter, who's our Director of Horticulture, and he works with the tree committee, currently, of course, chaired by Bill Smith. And together, they continue to make that decision, which was how it worked before, but it came to HPDRB for approval. So you don't have that wait for the next HPDRB meeting delay. It can now be handled more rapidly. What HPDRB does do with trees is if you're going to build an addition, we have a footprint that says that we won't ask you to replace those trees on your property or pay to put them elsewhere on Lakeside, unless they're vanity, what I call vanity removal, or close to an area you want to put a grill, but it's not in the impact zone of the building of a new foundation. And you'll work with us on that because it's very technical. So I'm going to give you the formula and you'll say, this is why we need to work with them. I don't want to remember that. Your foundation plus 2 feet plus 5 times the diameter of a tree trunk at 4.6 feet above ground level is free for you to take down without having to replace. You all got that now, right? Okay, it's called average breast height, 4'6" above grade. That diameter times 5 plus 2 feet, which is typically when you build a foundation, there's 2 feet extra that's dug so that you can waterproof the foundation when you build it. That tree is in a kill zone once you build that foundation. So we allow that tree to be removed without having to be replaced on the property. It's better that we remember the formula and you come to us than to try to say, well, did he say 5 times what? But anyway, it's one of the many things that we help you with when you bring a project to us. And then finally, hardscape. Hardscape is concrete, stamped concrete, permeable pavers, any pervious or impervious surface still all counts as part of the impervious surface ratio. And that is so that we control, to the best of our ability, where the water on your property goes. If you have too much hardscape, your neighbor's going to own your water. The general rule in Ohio is that whatever water you create from your roof down through your downspouts must be contained on the property you own. So it's challenging in Lakeside to do that. So we do our best to work with you with dry wells and other ways to maintain and control that. The runoff is obviously a big discussion item for the road projects. And so we're hoping that when we do new projects, the dry wells keep the water on that property and are not going to impact anything we have to do with the road project. But the road project is looking at inverse crowning of the roads to drive the water down the center of the roads rather than push them to the properties. Over time, they've crowned from layers of blacktop. So hopefully that'll correct that. All right. If you're applying for windows, doors, roof, siding changes, that can be done with photos. We don't need registered or licensed architect or designer drawings. We just need to know, here's a picture of the house, here's the window, and it's going to be the same size, but it's going to be this material and whatever, and we go from there. I want to also point out at this point, when you do a project and it requires structure, you're going to need to have a drawing for your permits. There are 3 stages to an architect that you work with. The first set is usually an elevation and a floor plan. That's all we need to make an approval. That's all you want your architect to draw before your project moves forward with our approval process. That's usually the cheapest part of the architect. That's about 1/3 of his total cost. You come to us, we approve a project, then you go back to the architect and he does what's called a construction set or a permit set. That's where he gets into the serious detail of the 2x4s, the wiring, the plumbing, all the detail that we're not interested in, but is going to cost you more from your architect standpoint to do on your own. So we do everything we can to keep your costs limited now. Don't do the whole architectural plan, come to us and hope. Give us the minimal that we need to approve. Let's get through the process and then go spend your money. So that's a change from how it used to be. People would have full plans come in. They're married to exactly what they want to do. We're going to do this. And then HPDRB would say, well, you can't do this, 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 and this. And then they go back to the architect. It's another $1,000. We're trying to minimize that process for you. So we tell you, just do the elevations before you get the whole thing done. All right. I've kind of touched on some of this through my other discussions. This just shows on the, going through the website, the layer that you start in community, you drop down to communities once you click community, and then you drop down to historic preservation. And it's really quite easy to get to. Once you get on that page, you have all of this information, which includes the application, the meeting dates, visitor policies, the association rules and regs, Danbury zoning applications should you need that, and then the Ottawa County building application. So in one spot, we try to give you every link you need to do your project. So there's other additional information in there, and our board is made up of a cast of very talented people. Dale's in the room right now, President Emeritus of Denison University, a PhD in history, and has built, I don't know how many, rebuilt how many historic buildings on campuses, you know, a lot. Highly experienced in historic preservation. We have a historic preservationist who has a company called Blind Eye Restoration that restores old windows. And she's given demonstrations here in Lakeside in the past. We would love to see an old wood window restored. We also recognize that we're not here to create undue hardship on the cottage owner. But if an old window can be restored, that is the best way to preserve, especially a contributing structure to the historic district. A contributing structure being one that was recognized in the application in 1982 that was awarded in 1983 that said, this cottage has been here a long time. It's part of the character of Lakeside. It's what makes up the historic character of Lakeside. But keep in mind too, that historic district isn't just cottages. The historic district includes what Lakeside is about, the 4 pillars in the Chautauqua movement. So all of that is part of the historic district. It's not just the facade and the cottages, but we're a big part of it. But you can actually, I believe, see some of that. Probably scroll down below, but we have, well, there's a link, the Gady Cern report, 1993. Gady Cern was an architect out of Cleveland, a firm. Gady had a cottage here, gave an awful lot to Lakeside as far as advice and designs, and generated a document that basically turned into Title III of our rules and regs. They wrote the book on the styles of Lakeside, the first one, and you can link that report there. and then the National Register contributor map link on the bottom. It's fun reading, it really is. If you're interested in the history of Lakeside from the historical building perspective, go to the site and look through some of these items. And then we also put in announcements because we have a process in the rules that say if you're going to do demolition, we need to post it. And we only require that it's posted in the window of the cottage, but we also post it online. Now, demolition is not the entire cottage. As in this example, and this is the current posting, they're removing more than 50% of the roof as per plan view, which is a specific language right out of our rules, which we consider demolition, so they have to do this. Their porch on the front, which is the front facade, is sitting directly on a slab that's sinking, and they need to put a foundation in it. So the best way to do that isn't to raise just the porch, but to take the porch off, put a new foundation in, and rebuild the porch as it was originally. So we're going to allow them to do that, so that required them to do a demolition permit. You will find demolition announcements on the HPDRB page. So next up is the more exciting part of the program, far better than me, much easier on the eyes. Sophie Schaefer, my sustainability intern. So Sophie has produced a lot of work products, which I'm going to brag about after she's done with her piece. But for HPDRB, we had her develop a green building checklist so that going forward, cottage owners think more green. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sophie and have at it. And tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Sophie.
Well, obviously, I'm Sophie, and I'm going to be entering my junior year at Michigan State University, and I'm studying environmental studies and sustainability, and I have a business minor, and that's pretty much it. So I was obviously asked to do a green building guide for HPDRB. Oh, other way. All right. Okay. So before starting the green building process, we recommend conducting an energy audit by a professional to help guide you through the process. You can find these people on ResNet or BPI, which is listed down below. So once you have your energy audit done, we recommend improving insulation, so enhancing that in your walls, your roof, windows, doors, etc., and that will reduce heating and cooling needs. And then consider installing a heat pump for higher efficiency HVAC systems, LED lighting for reduced energy consumption. They also have a longer lifespan. Solar tube lighting and skylights reduce consumption and improve overall efficiency of the system. Then low emissivity windows. These reduce heat transfer and improve energy efficiency as well. And then airtight construction. So an energy auditor will do this, and this is to have less than 1 air change per hour. This is, I forget what I was going to say about that.
Conduct a blower test. That's
yeah, a blower door test will help with that.
So what that does is pressurize the house. Yeah.
Yes. And then the next thing we have is appliances, so Energy Star rated, and then SEER rating for AC units, then a heat pump clothes dryer or induction electric ranges. And then the next thing we have is water fixtures and conservation. So low flow fixtures, those are faucets, shower heads, sinks, toilets. And then for water heaters, opt for tankless, heat pump water heaters and solar water heaters. And then for landscaping, natural surfaces to reduce water runoff using rain gardens and rain barrels, and then permeable pavers are preferred for drainage purposes. And then we also included trees for shading, but that's more energy efficiency and cooling. And then we have waste management. So repurposing your demoed materials and recycling them will reduce lumber use. And then recycling or donating your appliances and fixtures prioritize deconstruction over demolition to salvage materials. Those are cabinets, lighting fixtures, doors, etc. Keep doing the wrong way. And then long-term sustainability, choosing durable systems and materials that require minimal maintenance. Low-embodied energy, that's the energy consumed in manufacturing and transport. So that's something to consider when you're buying a product. And then design renovations to be adaptable for future changes and needs. And then ensuring long-term usability and sustainability. Then we also added the Fortified Home program. That's a construction method to protect your roof and home from extreme weather. and then renewable energy, designing for passive solar and heating, and then solar panels and shingles. So if you're putting on like a new roof, you should definitely consider solar panels or shingles. And I also made a guide on solar shingles for that I don't know where that will be. But. And then health and safety. For ventilation, when you do airtight construction, you need an air-to-heat exchanger. And then installing a hygrometer and a carbon monoxide to monitor humidity and pollutants. And then a radon detector test. This indicates if you have a radon problem, if there's a level higher than 4, you need to install a mitigation system. I think that's everything.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Couple items on there too, and this kind of like a public service announcement. So you've all heard about radon, and I thought, oh, radon, okay, fine. If you open your windows, you won't have any problems. Everybody know Fran Rodstrom? She had a radon detector. Oh, there she is. She saved my life, right there. So she had a radon detector, and I was overlooking at a project at her house, and I said, well, geez, radon detector. She goes, yeah, I'm measuring 8, I believe it was 8s. And she has a bare floor, which is unusual to have radon with a dirt floor. And so she said, here, take this home and check yours. And mine was like 12s and 16s. So I went and got the remediation done, bought myself my own radon detector, and I keep it in my closet in the bedroom, so I always check it. It's like 0.56 every morning. That's great. So people started borrowing my radon detector. The first person that borrowed it had 16s. The second person borrowed it had 26. They both have gotten remediation since then. The third person that borrowed it didn't have any radon. They didn't. Now, what was the difference between all of those homes? Other than friends, for some reason, we all disturbed the stonework under the cottage. We dug into rock. I have a 2-foot crawl. We busted out the rock. Once we busted out the rock, we've opened fissures that have radon exposing. So I'm suspecting that I don't want to create a panic, because the solution is quite simple. Open your windows, especially in the summer, right? But if you live here year-round, you'll want to consider remediation, which is a simple system, costs well, this one company, it doesn't matter what it takes, it's $1,245 for the system I had put in. And it creates a negative pressure vacuum underneath the concrete, or in Fran's case, she has to get some kind of membrane laid down over the dirt. But and then all of a sudden the radon just evaporates and goes away, as if your windows were open. Well, we don't open them in the winter, so it was up there at 12s. And, so I don't want you to panic, but what I would tell you is I've got a long waiting list for my radon detector. And if you know Fran, I'm sure she would lend you hers. Didn't that? It's already out being lent. It doesn't hurt to check. So that's one of the concerns that we have here. And this limestone that we sit on is our biggest offender. All right. Another public service announcement, and this is totally unrelated, but I wanted to take this opportunity. Oh, go ahead, Fred. Yeah, it's a funny name. What's the name of it? Air Thing. Yeah, if you want to go online and get your own radon detector, the cheapest one is called Air Thing. Cheap is a relative. I mean, it's $110, $120, something like that. But it's incredibly accurate and easy to use. Well, okay. Why does it matter? I can say with authority, since my daughter is the National Director of Foundation and Relations for the American Lung Association, radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States. So that's why it's important, yes. Because as soon as we told her we had radon, she says, and you let me bring my kids here? Your grandkids were in your house? American Lung Association. Here's the public service announcement, unrelated to this whole thing. But this is one of Sophie's endeavors. We're going to have an article come out in the paper in the next couple of weeks, but it's going to be a little bit late for most. Trash pickup. So we all know it's Tuesday is recycle and trash, Friday is trash. But we have this trash transfer station, which is a really cool way to say our dump. And the public service announcement is simply use the trash at your street because you're paying for that in your quarterly assessments. You have a line item bill for trash. When you take stuff to the dump because you don't want to see it at the streets, then it fills up the dump faster. The point of the trash transfer station is to take the public trash to that site, and all the cans that we throw stuff out when we're down at the waterfront, fill that up on its own. But when we take our stuff to the trash area, it costs Lakeside more. You're paying for it at the street, and you're not getting it picked up there. Now, you say, well, I only got one garbage can. So I would tell people live trash, which is your food scraps and waste that you would normally throw out. You can recycle, by the way, with less over at the recycling station behind, food waste recycling behind the Wesley Lodge. And I think you might have to sign up with less to let them know you want to get in there because it might be locked and there might be an access way. But if you don't, the trash goes in a bag in a can. That's so the animals don't get in it. If you have scrap wood or whatever you're putting in a bag and throwing out that animals aren't going to care about, you can put up to 20 bags at your street. So you're already paying for that. Please put your trash at the street. Don't go to the dump. Every year we have 40 mattresses in one weekend, the first weekend and last weekend of the summers. We have to then take them in our front end loader, put them in and smash the trash down to get them to fit. But then every dump costs a couple $100, and we're doing 3, 4, 5 on a weekend from those big weekends. So we're going to put this article out and start encouraging people, put your trash at the street. Okay, enough of the public service announcements. Skip the forms. I want to show you some examples. I like to use this one. This is 643 Cedar, the Curry family. This was completed last year. This was the before shot. My mouse doesn't show up there. Well, that's not fun. John's not here. I was going to say if you had my pointer. So the top left that's the before shot. That's what the house facade looked like. And that's the side of it. You can see this bump out window and a chimney, which they don't use because it would burn the house down. It's in bad shape. They needed a foundation. So you can see that's what the house looked like when they lifted it. You see the original boards, original front windows, doors, and windows. 100-plus-year-old doors and windows on the front there. There's the after shot on the far right. Notice that it went from a concrete slab porch to a wood-like composite material porch. And you see the double columns are preserved. The original front door and 2 side windows are preserved. So these 2 windows on either side of the fireplace are preserved. We did get rid of the fireplace. The house looks fairly much the same, but you can see the addition in the rear adding to the second story. And you can see that in the front they're a little bit larger there and a little bit more spaced to make it more usable on the second story. But this cottage, here's an example of, oh, I recognize that cottage. Oh, I didn't know all this work was done. Then this is now what I see today. It looks like the same cottage, right? So that's what we call the litmus test, the before and after. It should look about the same, and that's one of the best examples of that. Here's some other nice ones, just to show you before and after. This was siding that was discovered under this cottage after they took 2 layers of siding off. And what they did when they were done was they matched the original siding from 110 years ago on that cottage there, including leaving nail holes in. They face nailed it so that it looked like it did originally. So that's a before and after. That's a good example. Here's an example of, there's an empty lot, which happens to be right behind Dale's house, and there's a new cottage built on 600 Cherry. And so you'll see how a new cottage construction and HPDRB's influence on trying to keep it, on a new cottage we can say Lakeside-ish. On an old cottage we don't like to say keep it Lakeside-ish, we like to keep it Lakeside, but this is Lakeside-ish, and it has a good front porch. Now this is my house, so before and after. It was in horrible shape, built by a really nice family, I'm sure. He was a teacher, and so he got a lot of his materials out of the trash. I had a window in the back. This is built in 1983 on the left, and the back window was dated 1943. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't new when he put it in, but he found it in the trash somewhere. You see what I call tchotchke on the railings? Every piece of all those were completely different. When I went to HPDRB, they said, and that porch was falling off. It was actually in a storm, tore 1.5 inches away from the house. So it was kind of an emergency. We had to get it replaced. So they said, we want something that looks more like the character of the house. Well, since then, I put an addition on the back. You can see on the right. And that's the before and after. But you still would say, I recognize the front of that cottage after all the work we did. I live there full time, so that's why we put the extra space on. Now that's the end of the slideshow so far, but I do want to show you a little bit of Sophie's work product. Let's see, we got time. Hang on one second here. Solar shingle guide. So for HPDRB, Sophie put together this nice shingle guide, which I'll just briefly go through, but I'll tell you why we did it. So how many people have an electric vehicle, EV? Anybody? Oh, you know Frank does, yeah. He's got an electric vehicle and he's also got a plug-in hybrid. How many people are thinking about an electric vehicle? See, look at that. That's a better question then. So there are people that are saying, well, I have an EV, I've got to charge it, why not put solar panels on our house? We do have a rule that does say solar panels are not permitted on a contributing structure. We had an applicant that came in, his cottage was 100 and some years old on the original piece, but there was an addition. So we allowed it on the addition, and you will see it, it's kind of visible. But we decided this is going to be something that HPDRB over the next 50 years is really going to get deeply involved in. So we started the first program, and Sophie kicked it off with this solar shingle guide, which will grow every year, and every future sustainability intern will address. And it shows you what the alternatives are out there, what are solar shingles versus solar panels, and the pros and cons. I don't want to go into the details, but I want you to just be aware, not only that Sophie put this together for us, but that we're thinking through these things for the 21st century needs of the cottage owners. Certain panels look better than others. There are companies working to build what looks more like shingles. Tesla, as an example, although we met with somebody that used to work for Tesla, actually Dave Blank's daughter, Diana, if you know her, works for GAF, and she's in their solar panel division for roofing. And she said Tesla didn't make the ones that look like shingles yet. They just make people think they did, but they don't look bad. They look better than panels. These are certainteed style, and then down here, this is a Luma solar roof, and you can see if this entire roof is done in them, it doesn't look that bad. But it's our future, and we believe it's going to happen more and more. And Bill Smith is sitting here saying, I've got them on my roof, but you can't see them as well. We have to be cautious about what we can see. And and then Sophie put together what are the tax incentives and various things. But I wanted you to be aware of it because Historic Preservation Design and Review Board isn't stuck in the past. It is about what are the 21st century needs of the cottage while we create an environment that preserves the character that was and is and will always be Lakeside. So with that, I'm going to stop here and take some questions. And we got one right there. Caught you off guard there, Mike. But shout out to Mike for all he does here.
What about satellite dishes or starlight dishes for receiving cable and programming?
So for the most part, a satellite dish needs a southwest view. So you need to look that way. You need to look at about 20 degrees, and we have a lot of trees. There are very few places that are ever going to see that. So we've never really addressed that. Now you can go around, you can find, I know of 6 or 8 working DirecTV dishes right now. We don't have any rules that prevent antennas per se. So, but we also don't have many antennas because of the trees. That's pretty much our answer. So we're going to see an application from you, right?
It's a minor one. But the discussion of solar made me think about trees. And we have a very large and aging tree canopy.
Yep.
So have you thought about any considerations that might guide homeowners who are thinking about solar, and maybe it would only work if they removed a tree?
I would say, so that we, maybe doesn't sound like a friendly term, but we call that a vanity consideration, meaning I don't need to lose a tree. We don't want to lose the canopy. We don't want to lose a tree. I have the president of the tree committee sitting right here, the chairman. Okay. My answer would be, sorry, you're not going to have solar until the tree dies. But if the tree is not healthy, it's a reason for us to look at it, and we would look at it. Is that fair, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My solar installation is partially blocked in the morning by trees. I had some selective pruning done, which made a little difference, but I'm not going to take the tree down to get another hour of sunlight on my panels. Now, there are a surprising number of houses, I think, in Lakeside where solar works if we could put it on the whole roof. So I would disagree with the current, which was part of the argument we had when I got mine permitted.
He's referring to the rule that says that contributing structures would not be allowed to have solar. I would argue that the solar shingle guide is going to grow in the next few years with product that looks like shingles. And so
they're a long way from looking like shingles.
So if everybody's wondering why, we're rather than banter the whole thing about, the bottom line is solar shingles aren't anywhere near efficient as solar panels. But solar panels don't cover the entire roof. But when you cover the entire roof with what looks like a solar shingle, it's incredibly expensive, and you can buy power for the rest of your life and not ever put a solar panel up. So it's a trade-off in all kinds of, it's going to be an interesting conundrum over time. Oh, that's all right. This is 21st century needs of the cottage owners. We need to address it.
I'm the first big solar installation, and that was an interesting discussion when I got that approved in 2019.
And I was on that discussion.
Also, technology is changing pretty rapidly with solar panels. When I put my array on my home in Michigan, a little over about 12, 13 years ago now, those panels were rated 250 watts per panel. Standard panel today that you get is 350 to 400 watts, and there's new technology coming out, which means that you're going to have a lot less square footage involved in generating the same amount of power.
So let's move on to other questions, because this can go down a rabbit hole. That's really a whole nother topic for this kind of a session. Yes. I'll tee that up with John. All right, so I also want to introduce Dawn Drew in the back here. Dawn is shadowing me on what I do. I've been doing what I do going on 6 years now. And when I was on the board, I, of course, served on the Municipal Services Committee. And because of the service on MSC, went to probably half of the HPDRB meetings the first Saturday of every month. So I've been doing the first Saturday of every month for almost 8 years now. And I'm stepping down at the end of the year, and Dawn will be stepping up. But I'm not going anywhere. I still live here, and so when she is stumped or has questions, they'll be coming to me. I'm just going off the payroll. Grandpa time, fishing time.
You may have said this before I got here, but people should be aware that there is in Title III a chart, which Jim put together really, of, he showed you the appendix, which had examples of improvements to homes or changes to homes, what a change is, but there is also a chart that says what types of changes need to go to HPDRB,
Yep.
what can be approved by Jim, and it's a very helpful guide.
Rather than show you how where's that going? Let me just see if I can, for some reason here we go. It was off screen, I couldn't get to it. Oh, look at that, that's lovely. So, Discover Lakeside, communities, historic preservation, and here we are. Rules and regs. It's way down in Title III. There we go. Get rid of that. Expand that. So this is the chart Don's referring to right here. Oops. Butter mouse. Zooming by too quick. But anyway, there are, it's a matrix right in the rules that'll allow you to know where you can, who's going to approve what and who doesn't. What's maintenance, what requires to go to HPDRB, and what can the Lakeside Development Administrator, which is my title, do to approve. So, by the way, when you do a Lakeside Development Administrator approval in this process, you still make application. Rather than wait to go to the board, or rather than wait for the board's decision, I then review the application and do the decision. It doesn't mean you don't get to pay our $45 fee. So we have a $45 fee plus 25 cents per square foot addition to any addition you're building. I don't have the authority to approve additions, but I have authority to approve what it says here, review and approval by Lakeside Development Administrator, and things like investigative demolition. So before you demolish a house, I can approve portions that can be demolished so we can see what shape it's in. Change of material for driveway. So if you have a concrete drive and you want to replace it with a concrete drive, but it goes all the way to the pavement, I get to say, I'm the bad guy. I say no. In the right-of-way, it has to be permeable pavers. And then I work with you on the 12-foot for single car, 20-foot for two-car drive width, 5 feet for walk egress to the cottage to the street kind of thing. And I work with you on all that. But you don't have to wait, but you still do neighbor notification and things like that because it's important. And that brings up another good point too on some of these things. Why do I make you apply for an air conditioner? Oh, it's hot, I gotta get my air conditioning put in the house, I never had it. We have 3-foot setbacks. If your house is within 3 foot of the property line and you want to put your air conditioner here, you're basically asking us to approve that you can use your neighbor's leasehold to access your air conditioner, not only to install it, but to maintain it. So we want to make sure it's in the back and you've got more room to get to it. Those are just some of the considerations I wanted to give as an example. But you go down this list and it tells you what we can and can't do, what I can do, or what you, like for instance, in the maintenance, interior systems, exterior painting, and we don't, it says color in our rules, but we don't get finicky about colors until you say, well, I'm thinking neon yellow or chartreuse or, have you, South Beach, light pink, light lime green kind of things. that's not Lakeside-ish, so we do kind of get involved on that. But for the most part, we don't get too deep into the color selections. Anything else? I do want to thank Sophie for what she's done so far for us this year. She's actually created 7 or 8 different work products that are going to be permanent and going forward used either by HPDRB or by Lakeside. I always brag about the fact that our sustainability interns do things that will last for years and years. We have a fantastic intern in accounting, but he's just going to count beans for this year. You know, it's not going to be a lasting impression thing. But he's learning about codes and various things, and he's doing what he wants. We make sure her experience is educational. I fill out paperwork for her college to prove that she's done this. We'll work on a work product for her portfolio, and I'm very proud of what she's done, and I thank you very much for being part of us. Also, Dale Noble has been an incredible guide in this process. Don Leach has been an incredible guide in this process, and of course, Bill Smith and Frank Baker. So I'm glad they were in the room here. But just so you all know, and you all look familiar enough that I can say this, how many have been through the process with me? Okay, LPOA took a survey, and the survey came back. The second biggest issue was HPDRB process needs to be fixed. How many people believe that's true? That's right. The mindset is stuck in years past. We fixed this process. We've made it easy for everybody. We've made it less painful, and we've made it a lot better at getting to yes. Thanks for coming.